Welcome back to another episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so glad you're joining me today. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Mystie Winkler. She is a second-generation homeschooler. She homeschools her 5 children, or has homeschooled her 5 children. One of them is now...
I have 2 graduates.
2 graduates. Wow.
We're on the downhill slide.
That is amazing. Well, she can say she's accomplished homeschooling 2 of them, and 3 more are at home. She runs multiple podcasts, and she has written books. She does workshops. She is a busy lady. I'm going to let her tell us more about it. Welcome, Mystie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I have a blog and podcast called Simply Convivial, and then an interview podcast that's called Simplified Organization, and both of those have very short episodes, the kind of thing you can just listen to while you're folding a basket of laundry, little pep talks. And then I'm also co-host of the podcast Scholé Sisters, which is a podcast for classical homeschooling moms.
Oh, that's wonderful encouragement for homeschooling moms, especially if some of them are short episodes. Even if they're not, I like long ones too, because you can just press pause and come right back to it when you have time for more laundry, more dishes. That's kind of a never-ending battle. Tell me a little bit. You mentioned convivial. What does that term mean?
Yes, convivial means friendly, festive. It is an adjective describing an environment, an atmosphere. And so it's a weird word, and most people don't know what it means. I actually put the definition on the sidebar of my blog. And so most people can't say it, can't spell it. But I wanted to keep it as my word that I just keep in front of my face and keep reminding myself of all the time.
For sure.
Because if we're talking about productivity or hospitality or organizing things, sometimes it can be easy for those projects to become a way to control your life. Mm-hmm. And so convivial reminds me to think of how we're all getting along and working on all of these things together, and how any of the work that I'm doing is for the family all together and not for myself.
That's a great reminder, and that word really does summarize what you're attempting to achieve in your home for homeschoolers, but also just moms, even if their children go to school, or even if you're not a mom, just the atmosphere of the home is so important. You do run workshops. What do those workshops really delve into?
They're kind of about home management 101 type workshops.
Okay.
So many moms, it's funny. One time, I had a blog post on teaching kids how to do chores.
Okay.
And I got a blog comment on that. And it was a guy who said, that children shouldn't be doing any chores at all at home.
Oh,
they should be playing.
Did he have children? Did he do all the chores himself?
So he was philosophically opposed to children doing chores. But one of the things he said in that comment was, you don't need to spend so much time training kids how to do something that anyone can learn in 5 minutes. And I just realized right there that that's the attitude that our society holds about home management and cleaning, and that's the value that's placed on it is, anyone could do that in 5 minutes.
Right. There's not a value, or there's not a push to say this is something to achieve excellence in, and let's see how we can do it, and let's get better at it.
Yeah.
It's what's the minimal that we can get by with.
Exactly. And so many women come into homemaking and they want to be stay-at-home moms, they want to be homemakers, but they're expecting that anyone could learn to do it well in 5 minutes.
Right.
And so then they feel like they're failures, they can't do it, because it actually
is a lot harder than a 5-minute YouTube video.
That's right. And really, so my courses start off with attitude and expectations, because as women, we find that most of the sanctification that God is doing in our lives is through our homes and our families and motherhood.
Yes.
So we need to be expecting God to work on us in those areas, not that we accomplish something and check it off and move on, but that this is how God is working in us.
Yes.
Which means struggle.
Absolutely. And it's our culture looks down on homemaking, looks down on being in the home as if it's such a simple task. I've worked with women who work full time and don't really value their work in the home, even though they do I'm sure they go home and they do laundry and cooking and things like that, but they don't really value it. And a lot of times I've heard them make comments about coming to work to get away from the kids,
Yes.
or in their work, like out in the, out of the home. They value it. They want to pursue excellence. They want to attain the higher position, that sort of thing. But you don't hear them talking about what they're trying to achieve at home. It's more of a place, I guess, of just relaxation, or a place to go when I'm done with work, but not a place to achieve excellence in, and how to make it better and that sort of thing, which is sad because it's missing the point of your calling.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially when you've been a good student and you do the work that's assigned and you get a grade, and then you get a job and you do the job you're given and you get a paycheck. And you feel like you're good at those things, and then you come home, and it's not the same kind of situation. You're a manager,
Yes,
which is a completely different position than a student or an employee. And there aren't those gold stars, and no one else is giving you a schedule or a list of things.
you're the top boss.
Yeah, so you can know that you've done a good job.
Right. That's true.
So there's a lot more ambiguity and variability. So that can be unsettling.
Can be challenging.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep, that's true. Well, I'm sure you have lots of great advice in your workshops, on your website, in your books. It's a great topic for women to delve into and just really think through how to become better, become great in the role that God has given them as women. Okay, so having 5 children, 2 of which, aren't they both out of the house?
One is out of the house.
One is out of the house.
Yeah, but freshman at New St. Andrews, and he's still at home.
We're not quite old enough to have grandchildren yet.
Not yet.
But it won't be long. Your house will be really full of people. I do know you have company over at times. What is something that you love to serve when you have a crowd at your house?
One of my go-tos, it's the dinner that I always have the ingredients on hand for. And, if I am thinking, well, we're having people over or this is happening and I don't even want to think about about it at all. My go-to is a pulled pork recipe that is super simple. So I get the big pork in a bag at Winco. Whatever, sometimes it's even called pork cushion, which is a little disturbing.
I have to admit, I have never seen that.
Sometimes it's called pork carnitas, sometimes it's pork sirloin, but the big hunk of pork, whatever it is that they're putting in that bag.
Is it pre-seasoned?
Nope, it's just pork in a bag.
Okay.
And sometimes that's what the label says, pork in a bag.
Right. How fun. I know what to look for.
Yeah. It's usually the cheapest pork
and
at
that
the store.
also is helpful when you're thinking about if you have a budget, and you're thinking, oh dear, how am I going to feed all these people coming over? It's good to have an inexpensive cut of meat.
Yes. So I always have at least 2 of those in the freezer. So then I don't have to go to the grocery store ahead of time.
Do you pull it out a day or 2 ahead of time when you know company's coming, or do you have some special method of cooking it frozen?
I try to pull it out because it does cook better if it's not totally frozen.
Right.
But I have cooked it from frozen before in the Instant Pot.
Well, I was going to say,
works.
Yeah, Instant Pot.
Yes.
A lot of people talk about just throw those chicken breasts in there, totally frozen. I have one, and I need to get better at using it. I know Google's a good resource to just say, how do I cook frozen chicken breast? But I forget about it. So that's okay. That's good to know.
So I usually do it in the crock pot or the Instant Pot. And I slice 1 or 2 onions and put it at the bottom. And then put the pork on top. And then I sprinkle it with, I'm going to forget what it's called. Montreal steak seasoning,
Ooh, that's good.
which I get at
do like
Costco in
that.
the giant
Uh-huh.
container.
Yes.
And no liquid, just the onion, the pork, and the Montreal steak
Wow.
seasoning.
So the I guess the liquid that's, or I don't know if you call it liquid, but the moisture that's already in the pork is what comes out. And
Yeah, and it's a cheaper cut, so it has more fat on it.
Okay.
And so the fat renders off, and so it kind of cooks in its own juices.
Okay.
And I cook it in the crock pot on low, from like 8 or 9 a.m.
Yes.
Or on high if I started at lunch, or in the Instant Pot for 90 minutes. So like mid-afternoon I can start it, and it can be ready. And then it just shreds super easy, and it always feeds more than I would expect for the amount of meat that it looks like when I put it in.
Yeah, shredded meat does seem to go far. Mm-hmm. What do you serve it with?
So I do it a few different ways, which is another reason why this is my go-to. I can make it gluten-free and dairy-free if that's what we need.
Right.
And serve it with roasted potatoes and a coleslaw. Or my family prefers to eat it just on a plate with a roll on the side and sour cream on top.
Ooh.
We serve leftovers in tortillas with sour cream. It's a really flexible, and of course we do pulled pork, like sandwiches.
Yes.
You can get buns,
Uh-huh.
and then that can be fast too, because it's more just prepared. You buy buns and some coleslaw and barbecue sauce and the pulled pork, and it's fun. Pretty much everyone likes it. Kids can eat it. You don't have to sit there cutting meat for small children.
Right, because it's so
already
tender
shredded.
and it's shredded, and it makes it easy for the parents with little ones.
Mm-hmm. And with different ways to eat it, it helps my family not get tired of it also, because
That's
there's
true.
usually going to
It's
be leftovers.
presented in different ways.
But
this is a brand new meal the next day. It's not leftovers at all.
And so I'll do that for potlucks or for pretty much anything, and I have for a long time. And last year, 2 years ago, I actually had a family, their daughter was getting married and asked for that pulled pork to be at their wedding reception.
Wow.
So I put on their wedding reception menu, and together it was some family favorites, but it was a great menu. It was that pulled pork, which was super easy. We could make huge quantities because it actually freezes really well also. So we cooked it and shredded it all ahead of time and just froze it, warmed it up in roasting pans.
Idea.
And then served it with macaroni and cheese and potato salad and green salad and rolls. And
It sounds delicious.
it was great. And it, 300-400 people, but it really, was mostly done ahead and not a big deal to
And that type
put
of
out.
menu really fills people up, and it's
It
very
felt like
hearty.
a homey
It's
comfort meal.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's a great menu. Okay, well, I will have to post all of these recipes and her tips and her changes. You can find it at comeoverfordinner.com. Yeah, so if you go to the home page, you have to go over to the recipes page for the blog, and then it has her name, and we'll list everything there that she's recommended. So, and then there's also a shop section that shows the must-have kitchen items that she recommends and other people recommend as well, which is also kind of fun because sometimes if people talk about something and then you go to try to find it in the vast internet that's out there, you have no idea if you've actually found the right thing. So it's an actual picture and link to the thing we talked about. Not that you can't, deviate from it, but at least you know which one we're referring to. Okay, so some shortcuts. You mentioned you can make this and freeze it completely ahead of time, which would make your main dish just completely done the day of. Mm-hmm. Do you throw it in your refrigerator, like, say, the day before to start defrosting, or do you just take the frozen, pre-cooked meat out and put it in your oven on a really low temp?
I've pretty much done everything from frozen because that's just the way things work out sometimes. So thawing it beforehand is better, but
it works.
It works. I've put it on the stovetop with just a tiny bit of water in the pan on low to
Steam it,
and then it, the water will evaporate, and so then it just warms up in that. Or tossed in the crock pot to warm back up. Probably like a braising pan would also work in the oven, but I've not tried that way. But I would.
Yes. To be determined. The next time she's having company over and is in a hurry. All right. What is your best prep tip when you're getting ready for a crowd? What helps you?
We have kind of a getting the house ready code word, I suppose you'd call it, in my family, and we call it EHAP.
Okay.
So, and we use it most days, actually. So it's not just for company, but it's very helpful when there's company. And so EHAP stands for Everything Has a Place.
I love it.
I read it on the internet on someone's random blog somewhere, and I've never been able to find it again, where I found this. But I found it, and we adopted it, and it's been so great. So, because one reason why is we use it, and so the kids are practiced. And so, and it kind of sounds like a Mission Impossible kind of thing.
Right.
Like we're going to EHAP.
Code word,
not like we're going to pick everything up.
Right, that's a lot more boring.
Yeah, pick up the things that are not in their right place, and then put them back in the place where they belong.
Right.
Which, that's,
Which
what we really mean.
Tried to train them where everything goes.
Yeah,
Like,
not just move the mess
Right.
or stick things under the couch
Right.
instead of on the couch. Like that's EHAPing is everything has a place, so put it there.
And it does make life run easier. Everybody does spring cleaning. Well, I say everybody, I don't know. A lot of people talk about spring cleaning or organizing this or organizing that closet or this drawer. And it really does help if you know when it's out of place, right where to put it, because the next time you know right where to look. Mm-hmm. We had pulled out some tape this past week, and my son was like, Mom, I'm just going to put it right here, totally random spot. Yeah. And it wasn't in the way, but I was like, well, if you don't put it back in that drawer, I will never remember that your new spot, just, tucked behind wherever it was, tucked behind some books or whatever, I will never remember the tape is there, and we will have to buy new tape.
Tape and scissors, they're always getting misplaced.
Like you're going to have to trot down the hall, open that top drawer, and put the tape back, because that is its spot. So he was like, okay, all right, I got it.
That's helpful. And then I always clean the bathrooms like half an hour before people come. I was like, if the bathrooms are clean, we're going to be all right. That's like the top hospitality place. So people can sit on a couch if there's laundry there, actually.
Right.
But really, clean bathrooms, hospitable.
It really is. It really is.
And doing that last, because just in case with the small children, then that it's state.
Yes, that's a great tip. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, just responding to the man who thought, well, children shouldn't do chores. How do you incorporate your children? You mentioned the code, the code word, but how do you assign rooms or tasks, or do you have a list? How do you draw them into helping clean where everybody knows kind of what their job is?
Yeah, for EHAP, it's always been something we do all together. Mm-hmm. I tried for many years to have different kinds of routines or schedules, or here, I'm going to train you to do this job with the goal that I wouldn't have to be involved at all anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was convicted of that. And so part of our EHAP changeover, when that happened, probably more than 10 years ago, they were all still pretty small. And I realized, no, it's actually my job to make sure they put things in the right place.
Right.
So we go room by room together, and usually it's just the public spaces. So like we'll be all in the living room, and we're in EHAP. So mostly I want them to learn to see what's out of place, but I'm also there watching to help them if they need something pointed out, to say, no, you're not actually done yet. To say, where are you going with that? Oh, where is its home? Do you know where its home is? And just
a constant training.
Flow smooth. And that's actually my job, is to help them learn these things and help them notice things and be motivated to go all the way to put it in its correct home. And that kind of training isn't like a week or a month. They're in our homes for about 18 years because it takes about that long.
And you hope they remember it when they're in their own apartment. Yes. No, that is great training. And, if you do it all in one room together, it's quick. If you have a lot of helpers, it's super quick. So it makes it maybe not as tedious.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, now my youngest is 10. And so it's a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and 10-year-old. And we've been doing it for like my youngest's whole life.
Right.
And so I do now say, okay, can you guys EHAB this? And I'm going to go do this. And it totally works.
Yes.
But
you can come back and maybe everything really is done. They have eyes to see what really truly needed to be done, which is great. I mean, that's a great skill to have because eventually they will be running their own homes, boy or girl, I had a friend years and years ago where her culture was more the type where the woman does everything and the sons learn nothing to do with the home. I said, well, there's a lot of young men on their own that aren't married.
That's right.
Maybe they have a college roommate, or maybe they run their own apartment, or whatever it is. They don't always just move from mom's house straight into a wife taking care of them hand and foot. And that's a little tough on a brand new young wife. Especially one who's new to running her own house and maybe starting to have babies and morning sickness. I'm like, that's just, anyway, we had a great conversation about it. It's like, there's value. It's very valuable for boys to also know how to have a clean environment, how to do household tasks, how to cook something for themselves. So that's wonderful. How would you best show warm hospitality to those coming into your home? How do you make your home feel warm and welcoming when guests walk in the door?
One suggestion I learned from a lady at our church years ago was to actually have ready something for a guest to do when they arrived. So if they come in and dinner isn't just ready already, to actually have an idea of something they could do to help. Because usually someone will walk in and see it's not ready yet and say, what can I do to help? And if it's all just in your head and you have 3 or 4 different things going on at the same time, it's really hard to delegate. You're like, wait, I would have to stop and think about what can I pass on to you? Or, do I actually have a clean cutting board to give you to do this or that? But that actually people feel more a part of the gathering when there's something to do. The hospitality we tend to do is like just weeknight family dinner, so it's much more just come into the flow of the home. And so saying, oh, well, here, could you chop this cucumber to add to the salad? And it's right here. Then we can chat more, and it feels more natural and relaxed rather than awkward.
The family prep time.
Yes.
So when you kind of think through a few tasks, and then you just have them ready in your mind, or do you write them down, or what? How do you know? Like you said, you don't want to have to stop and think about what are a few things I can have help with. You just kind of. Did you say you get out a cutting board, kind of put something over to the side and wait?
I have before, especially if I know that it is going to be a while before dinner is actually ready, because the meat was too frozen.
Right. Because you forgot to defrost the meat.
Or, it's being grilled or something. Usually it's something to do with salad, because salad is just my go-to delegate piece of the meal, because it kind of is better if it's done last minute. It's a lot of chopping or something. And so it's like, okay, well, I have the things for the salad. If they ask, I'm not going to make them.
Yes.
I'm not going to expect them to come in and help me.
No.
But it's that,
if
can I help you?
Yes.
Then it's like, it's salad.
But
then that's also our go-to, if you're texting to invite someone over, they must say, what can we bring? Salad. Just say salad.
People usually have their favorite, but it also is not telling them exactly what to bring, because they can vary so widely.
And it's fun to see what they bring. And then usually any salad goes with almost any meal. So you don't have to have picked what you're going to have for dinner yet when you say, you can bring a salad.
Yeah, that's a great idea. When y'all invite other families over, do you typically are there children that come as well?
Oh, yeah.
How do you get them involved in prep, or do they just go and play?
Usually they go play with our kids. Yeah.
That's typically they're ready to just go and see what the new toys are or what the yard looks like.
Usually it's not the children coming in asking, how can I help?
Which would also kind of slow things down. I did see, I think it's listed on the shop spot on the website, but there is this adorable, and I don't even know if it was around, maybe I didn't know about it when my kids were young. We did not have one, but it was a knife that's kid friendly.
Oh.
And so they can chop things, but it won't cut them. I don't know if it's plastic, but it's not, it's sharp enough to cut through some things. But
That's cool.
Won't cut their skin. So I always thought, I need to buy one of those, and like if a kid comes over, let them chop something.
Yes.
That would be fun. I don't know what it would be. Guess I'd have to experiment to see what it would chop. Maybe cucumbers or something. They're soft enough. But yes, that's a great ways to get people ready, just feeling a part of the home and a part of the life and kind of relaxed, especially if you didn't know them real well. If they weren't your best friends or something, it would be a great way to just kind of get the conversation started.
Yeah. Well, hospitality in a lot of circles is not very common. And even a family dinner is not as common as it ought to be. And so guests can feel awkward coming in. And especially, so you want to work them into the flow of the family or just the flavor of the home. And so just kind of thinking about what would help them feel at home. And especially here in the Pacific Northwest, that kind of means as casual as you can make it.
Yes.
Don't make things weird.
Don't set out 3 forks on one side and 3 spoons on the other. That is true. You have to read your audience, and you have to know what will make them feel welcome. You don't want to throw something out there that's real formal and stiff and make them feel like, oh, the good thing my parents didn't have family dinner when I was growing up. They should miss it, and they should realize that's something that they need to start and need to create in their family if they didn't have it, because it is such a wonderful time.
Yes.
What is your must-have kitchen item, and where can we find it?
Well, I collect whisks. I love whisks.
So do you have a drawer or a canister?
A canister.
A cabinet?
Canister on my counter. And I don't know, it was a few years into being married where I just realized there are actually all kinds of whisks.
Okay.
A flat whisk,
true.
a sauce whisk, and I had never seen anything but a basic balloon whisk. So I started collecting whisks because I just find them fascinating and I like them. But my favorite one is a dough whisk.
I do not know what a dough whisk is.
If you make the no-knead bread or any kind of really thick bread dough, it's a must-have.
Okay.
Mine has a wooden handle, but it's a metal. It's like a loop with a loop inside of it.
Okay.
And it will go through a really, really stiff dough very easily.
I need one of these in my life. I
think it's a Danish dough whisk.
Okay. So what do you make? Do you make Danishes, or what do you use this for specifically? What is your go-to bread?
I use it for the no-knead bread. So you mix it up the night before with just a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast, and it's just flour, water, salt, yeast. And then it just sits overnight, and then you bake it in a covered dish. It was really big on the internet like in 2007, but
okay.
I'm still making it.
Absolutely. Sounds tried and true.
That's right. My husband, it's a crusty bread. My husband doesn't like sourdough, so I don't have to keep a sourdough pet.
You don't have a sourdough with a name?
So it's my substitute. It goes great with soup.
Good homemade bread.
Great. Yep. It takes almost no effort, and you have to think about it the day before. Or there's the book artisan bread in 5 minutes a day.
Okay.
Pretty much any of those doughs, the dough whisk will just work right through if you don't want to get your mixer dirty.
Yes. See, I do have a stand mixer that has the dough hook, but that might be more for, I don't know if it would do quite the same thing you're talking about. Maybe it does.
Yeah,
It's like more of a kneading.
Yeah, it's like
technique.
a dough hook that you can use manually.
You just can do a quick little whisk on your counter, not have to put it into the stand mixer.
Yes.
So interesting. New must-have kitchen item on my list. Tell us a story. Do you have a story for us? Maybe potentially a funny story that has to do with hospitality.
Yes. So this was kind of a formative hospitality experience for me. I think it was 12 or so years ago, 12 or 11 years ago. I was 29 or 30, kind of a transition year. It felt like, is it time to be a real grown up?
It's time.
And my husband and I had people over, not infrequently before, but I realized, this experience made me realize that I hadn't stepped out of my comfort zone in offering hospitality. We had over new people who were in our age demographic and people we'd known a long time. And this experience helped me see that those were just baby steps and it was time to move on.
That's when it's easy or easier. I mean, obviously, there's always hard work put into hospitality, hard work behiund the scenes.
It turns out I was taking the easy path.
But if you're always inviting your great friends over, okay,
so
you do have to step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, so my husband and I have actually had been at our church that we were at before we moved here to Moscow for the life of the church, actually. So it was partly realizing, we are the people who need to be welcoming the people. It's our job to be welcoming the people in and helping them get their bearings and learn the ropes and introduced to our town and all that kind of thing. And so, like I said, we had a few people over who were in our age demographic. And my husband and I were talking about people in the church that we had never had dinner with, we'd never really talked to, and made a list. And I took care of the easy ones first.
Baby steps. You have to, start pedaling the bike.
Yep.
Make sure you don't wobble and fall off.
And then there was this sweet older couple, and they were from the South. Her accent was very much like yours.
She's a great lady, I can tell already.
And they had actually been at our church already for over a year. And this was a small church. It was like 150 people. But the things that she did and the things that I did, didn't intersect. But both of us were very involved. And they just happened to never intersect. So I had never they'd been there for over a year. And I couldn't go up. I felt like, do I go up and say hi, I'm Mystie?
Right.
How do I?
I've been here a year. I know who you are. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know.
And I mean, my mother-in-law's at the same church. My mom's at the same church. 5 of my siblings are at the same church.
So it's so easy to just find your group and not branch out of it.
Right. Well, it's just, come into contact with someone I'm related to already for sure. But
yes.
But so how does that introduction work? Where I feel like I can't just pick up a conversation because I've never actually talked to you face to face, but I hear all about you, and I assume that's probably likewise.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, we're gonna have them over for dinner, and it just felt so awkward because I didn't how do I even start that conversation? And I played lots of versions in my mind, and I postponed it week after week, Sunday after Sunday, because I just felt awkward. And I realized this isn't going to get better. You just, I'm actually being awkward isn't terrible. It's not the end of the world.
You will still be alive at the end of it. So the next day, the sun will rise the next day.
And just own the situation. Just basically start with an apology. Like, I would like to get to know you better. You've been around and we haven't talked. And we would love to have you over. Right. So finally, I just did it, walked up and said, all right, we haven't really talked before. And of course, she knew who I was. So we've never really chatted. We'd love to have you and your husband over for dinner. And she very graciously accepted, and she made it so easy.
That's wonderful.
All the awkwardness was on my part. And then I always felt like we're probably missing some manners, we're being rude without even knowing it because they're from the South. Like, they know how to do things, and we don't really know how to do things up here.
Some of the Southern ladies do. I don't know. I feel like it's a lost art everywhere, honestly.
She seemed like the kind who did.
But she might, if she was an older Southern lady, like my grandma, she had the rules down. She and her friends. They had a lot of etiquette rules that they knew and taught me, which is not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, sometimes it can help with that awkwardness, just knowing, like, oh, this is what you do. I can do this.
Right. You feel more comfortable knowing that what I'm doing is the correct way of doing something. Mm-hmm. But it's also a good thing to remember not everybody knows. It's okay if they use the wrong fork or whatever. You just...
Well, she
on
was
the other end, don't ever point it out.
That's right.
Which is also very good etiquette.
She was very gracious, and they came over for dinner, and it was wonderful. They told stories. This was probably the first time we'd had just one couple over outside of our demographic. And they had wonderful stories, and it was a great experience. It was the first time she actually wrote and sent a thank you card for us having her over for dinner afterwards. Uh-huh. And I went, oh, this is manners. I just learned a thing.
That is deep South manners. The art of the thank you card. Yes.
So that was great. And what came out of it was my husband and I both resolving that we would always invite new people over while they were still new.
So the awkwardness wouldn't build and build and build. Like we've passed each other 100 times without speaking.
We're still waiting to see how that rule adapts to a church,
a larger church.
400. Yes. It's a little different.
When you go to a church that's very, very large and you're the new person, well, even when you become the old person, you've been here for years and there's still new people coming in, and there's people that it becomes a lot. You do have to kind of rethink, like, there's hundreds that are new. To me, anyway.
Yep. So, the first people that we met at church on one of our first Sundays had moved the same week that we had. So,
I have a twin sister, and she went to one of the conference, or well, I don't know if it was a conference, but a talk or workshop or something that the church put on for new members, and just telling a little bit about the church and what they believed and answering any questions. She made herself talk to people there, and of course, I would think everyone there was new, maybe brand new to the community even, maybe had just moved from across country, and she talked to people and still has really, really great friends from somebody that she just said, well, I'm going to force myself to go up and talk to this person and introduce myself as if I'm not new. Even though she was new, she put herself out there. And I thought that was a really great encouragement. Like, it kind of is all of our responsibility to greet people and be cheerful and be the one to speak and not keep it in our minds that somehow someone needs to do that for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before we moved here, we were visiting, and I was able to chat with an older lady who's been in the community for a long, long time. We moved here from my hometown where I grew up, so I said, I don't know. It's going to be awkward. I've never been the new person, so I don't have any experience being the new person. And in a lot of ways, it was that fear of being awkward all over again. Mm-hmm. She said, well, what do you do when new people, show up at your church now? I said, well, we have them over for dinner. She said, well, have people over for dinner. Yeah. And so we did. And it's been such a blessing that you don't have to wait to be established. You just get to know people by having them over for dinner.
Well, and what a quick way to create friendships.
Oh, yeah.
you get to say a few things in church, but it's a very quick, the sermon's starting or people are leaving. It's not a time where you can really get to know someone very well. And so having somebody into your home and having conversations, learning about their life and where they're from and hearing their stories, I mean, you can create friendships so readily, even after just one meal together.
It is. That's great.
So,
yeah.
And then the next time you see them at church, you're not strangers. You can smile and wave and greet them, and something about them, something to say,
to connect with. Yeah. So having that experience now, it's like anytime I feel like, okay, well, this is awkward, or in this situation, it's awkward. Like, that doesn't matter. Like, what's the right thing to do? Do that. It doesn't matter if it's awkward.
Well, it is, like, most of the time is going to be awkward, or you're going to feel like it is. But if you recognize that the person you're about to walk up to is feeling just as awkward or as out of place, especially if they're new and they're maybe even thinking like, why did I even come? Mm-hmm. If they're a real anxious person, like maybe they've come into church for the first time, somebody invited them, and if they're not made to feel welcome, maybe they won't come back. So just to show them the love of Christ is a great thing. But just knowing that you walking up and breaking the ice is one of the best things you can do. And I have had that reaction so many times where people just seem so grateful because they were standing there just awkwardly. No one is talking to them, because it just happens that if we're in a church, we've been maybe a long time even, where there's a lot of familiarity, friends and family, you kind of naturally just quickly break into your little groups, and of course you want to catch up. But if there's somebody on the outskirts, you've got to pay attention to that and pull them in and have you met so and so, let me introduce you to whoever. But then the other thing I try to remember too is open-ended questions. I've taught my kids that, like, if you just say, hi, how are you? Or whatever, just a really basic question and that they can answer one word to, it really makes the conversation dead. Good. If you can, maybe one of those is fine, but you kind of have to have a few open-ended questions somewhere floating around in your mind where you can get a start, especially with people who aren't very chatty. So.
Yes, once I learned from an older lady at our church that it's the hostess's job to have some questions ready in case conversation flags. And that can be tricky, especially we are not sports people or TV watchers, and that seemed to be like, oh, what are you what show are you watching, or what's about the game? And it's like, I don't know, actually. Can't.
Right. Someone, I don't know if they mentioned on here, if it was just a conversation I was having, but they talked about how they ask people where they're from and what kind of foods did you eat there? People talk about like their favorite foods or their favorite memories or their favorite things to do. Like, oh, you're from, wherever, North Carolina. And then they start talking about the vacations they went on, or I've heard it just, maybe that's a little more like everybody's from somewhere. So maybe that would be something that would be an idea. Yeah. And I'm sure there's lots out there. Yeah. More than I'm thinking of right now. There's lots of conversation starters. But like you, it does, like you mentioned, you don't have to necessarily have to be a sports fan or a TV fan to come up with things just about their life. Or even just what's going on currently in their life, what they do on a day-to-day basis, what interests them.
Yeah. Yeah, back where we moved from, if it was someone not from church, like a coworker or some other outside the church situation, we'd say, like, how'd you end up in the Tri-Cities? Because then that's a story. Or our go-to for if it's someone in the church and this worked there, it works great here. But it's, how did you become Reformed? Or how did you become a Christian? And then that's a story that it's always very interesting and fun to hear about. Or how did you meet your spouse? Those are fun stories to hear people tell.
Yes. And then then you get to kind of delve into a little bit deeper into their story and their life and circumstances. And usually, if you're a good listener, it usually opens up more questions. Yeah. That's how I am anyway. I'm curious. So I try not to be nosy. I definitely can come up with some follow-up questions if you start telling me about your stories. Well, Mystie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so much fun, and I have learned so much. So thank you for taking time out of your busy day with all your podcasting and blogging and writing to come and share some of that wisdom with us.
Thank you so much. It was so fun.
Until next time, bye for now.